Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 175. Hi, I'm Jill. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Chris. Jill and I are your hosts for this podcast and the founders of the Becoming Ellie community.
We decided to name our community Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. Chris and I thought we want to be like Ellie, fit and strong as we age.
That's right. You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and this podcast at our website, becomingellie.com. Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I. Sign up for our newsletter while you're there.
Today, we're talking with gerontologist Sally Duplantier about Healthspan and aging well. Let's go to the podcast.
Sally Duplantier is a gerontologist, health educator, and researcher. She founded her current company, Zing, with a mission to help older adults live their best lives longer through better lifestyle choices and health equity. She's passionate about increasing health span, the number of years we are free of chronic disease and disability.
Sally returned to school in her 60s. She received an MS in gerontology from the University of Southern California and a graduate certificate in Qualitative Research from Indiana University. She was recently accepted into a doctoral program at the Richard M. Fairbanks School of Public Health.
Sally is a regular guest speaker for organizations like Stanford University and the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Her research has been published in peer-reviewed journals such as Nutrients and the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. Welcome, Sally. It's great to have you with us.
Chris and Jill, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for talking with us. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about why you started Zing and maybe more to the point is what it means to be a gerontologist.
So I will tell you that I didn't really mean to start Zing. I kind of thought I was done working in my 60s. I started my first business at age 28, sold it after 25 years, had a retirement party. Then I worked for 8 more years in leadership development, and I had another retirement party. And then I started Zing 16 months after that. And it was in part because I believe in helping people. I believe in having a purpose. I believe in making a difference in the world. And I was older. So I thought, well, okay, what do I know about this field? Not so much, which is why I went back to school, but I know what it's like to be an older adult.
You said you went back to school, graduate school in your 60s, and now you're going into a doctoral program. Is that right?
Yes.
How was that? I mean, what has prompted you to do all the continual lifetime learning?
Part of it is that I love to learn, and I'm good at learning. And I think we enjoy doing things we're good at. When I started Zing in my mid-60s, I really didn't have a background, professional background in helping older adults. So it's why I went to graduate school and got the MS in gerontology. And gerontologists study aging, but we study it from all different aspects. So we study it from lifestyle, we look at social impact, we look at housing, transportation. It's very much of a holistic look at aging. But when I was in graduate school, I kind of fell in love with research. And I did an internship where I published my first paper. And then I wanted to publish more papers. So I love this idea of kind of show me the evidence. I think potentially we're getting away from that now. We can't just be quoting the blog du jour or the idea du jour. We need to make judgments and provide sound advice based on the best science available. And I love to do that. And then I think part of me doesn't know maybe how hard this doctoral program is going to be, but I'm excited for it.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
What are some things we can do to improve? This is a big question here. So
this is a big one.
what are some things we can do to improve brain health and avoid decline in the brain, whether it's cognitive, movement, emotions, all the things that the brain does for us?
Remember, I said I published like my first paper when I was an intern. It was on the link between diet and cognitive decline. So there are many things that we can do to avoid cognitive decline. In fact, about 45% of dementia can be either delayed, the onset delayed, or eliminated completely because of lifestyle choices. So one is nutrition. So let's talk about that. In general, it's a combination of what you eat and what you avoid. And a general piece of advice about what to eat is following a Mediterranean diet. That's the diet of the Mediterranean people. It's been studied since the 60s. Mediterranean diet is good for heart health, brain health, diabetes control. Then there's something called the MIND diet, which was developed much later out of Rush University in 2015, but it's really the Mediterranean diet. It just adds more fruits, especially berries, and more leafy greens. So nutrition is one.
Yeah, so we have what to eat, but what about avoid?
Yeah, what to avoid. Okay. So what to avoid, it's not super surprising. Sugar, okay? Reducing the amount of sugar. Alcohol. Saturated fat. So saturated fat is the kind of fat that's found in meats, but it's also found in cheese. And if like cheese is your go-to food, your favorite snack, I'd say like maybe find a different snack. So that's saturated fat, but something like nuts are unsaturated fat. So that's a really good substitution. Instead of eating butter, eat olive oil. So it's replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat. So those are some of the big ones: sugar, alcohol, and saturated fat.
Just in general, I mean, as we age, I hear people all the time say, "Oh, I just had a senior moment," or whatever. What is considered normal aging and what is abnormal? Like if you lose your keys a few times or, misplace them, I mean, not in the refrigerator exactly, but, how can we get a good grip on what's normal or not or normal and take care of things?
So I think that we have a tendency as we get older to explain away any lapse in memory as a senior moment. And quite honestly, Jill and Chris, everybody loses their keys, or everybody walks into a room and forgets why they went there, or everybody says, "Oh, later today I need to stop at the dry cleaner," and then they forget it. That's normal. It's normal if you go to a shopping center, park your car, and you can't remember where you parked it. That's normal. But if you walk out the door of the shopping center and you don't know where you are or how you got there, that's not normal. And one of the challenges is that Alzheimer's or dementia, it's hard to diagnose. And it's a disease of stages. And in the early stages, what could be mild cognitive impairment that you might be leaning towards dementia might appear just like normal aging loss. So one of the things I advise people to do is talk about it. It's interesting. Early childhood education will help protect against dementia in later life, but those of us who are educated are also better at hiding it. And we might be having some decline, but we don't want to acknowledge it. And quite honestly, the earlier you start to discover this and can make changes, the better.
I noticed my doctor, who is a young woman, when she'll go through the thing and she comes to memory, she just sort of automatically dismisses, like, oh, she just assumes that that's not an issue, which I noticed that she does that because I think that actually is a question she should be concerned about with me at my age.
I would agree. I would agree. And at least have a conversation. Now, Jill, you might want to say, oh, there's no problem at all, but at least raise the question. I think, it's interesting. So I'm a gerontologist. I look at aging from a very holistic perspective. Then there are geriatricians who really are medical doctors who specifically treat older adults, but they are few and far between. And I think we need to educate our healthcare professionals more on kind of the process of aging and have them ask some of those questions.
Are there ways that we could, kind of change things or slow down brain aging process?
Well, yes, we definitely can. So that 45% of lifestyle choices. So I mentioned nutrition, but other things that play a key role are movement. So the advice that we've been getting about the 150 minutes of moderate cardiovascular activity has a huge impact on brain health. Sleep has a big impact. Getting regular sleep, 7 to 8 hours after age 65, or 7 to 9 hours for other adults. And then how we handle stress plays a big role. And then social engagement. So social engagement is one of the strongest predictors. And unfortunately, as we get older, we may be less socially inclined. Or we may have a disability. We may start losing our hearing or our vision. And then we withdraw and don't want to interact as much. So all of those play a role.
Can you explain the difference between crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence?
Yeah. Crystallized intelligence is kind of what we know. It's the sum of what we know. And what's exciting about crystallized intelligence is that it increases as we age. We always assume that our intelligence goes, downhill, or our thinking goes downhill as we age. And if you think about it, ladies, what we know actually increases. So that's good. But fluid intelligence is more of our problem-solving capability. It's our kind of executive function, our decision-making, our planning, our ability to solve problems quickly. And that tends to decline as we get older. But quite honestly, it starts going downhill probably in our late 20s. So,
Really?
it doesn't go downhill as fast as when we're older.
Yeah.
But the other thing I would say about this is that these are kind of norms, and yet we have people that we've studied who are called superagers. And they are people who are in their mid-80s, and they have the physical and cognitive abilities of people 10 or 15 years younger. So just because something is kind of a norm or accepted around brain health, it doesn't mean that that's going to happen to everyone.
In our introduction, we said that you help people live lives longer through better lifestyle choices, which I understand, and health equity. What is health equity?
Well, I am so glad you asked this because everything I've said so far would indicate that we have choices. So, for example, all of us, if our doctors tell us, hey, you need to eat better, you need to eat more fruits and vegetables, we can go to a local market. Maybe it's Whole Foods, maybe it's Safeway, but we can go somewhere where fresh fruits and vegetables are plentiful. If our doctors tell us, hey, you need to move more, you need more exercise, we can go out and walk. But think about entire populations who don't have that access, who live in food deserts, or they live in food swamps, where all they have are convenience stores with fast food, or they can't walk outside for exercise because they might get shot. And I care that every older adult has the opportunity to age in a healthy way. And a lot of my research and a lot of my community involvement, and quite interestingly, my interest in public health, is around this health equity issue. How do we make healthy aging more accessible to underserved and vulnerable populations?
Equity being equal among people.
Yeah, and I know equity is not a popular word right now, but how do we level the playing field? How do we make things possible for people who don't have access?
I even think of some places where there are lots of apartment buildings that elderly people live in, but there's not really a place to walk outside. It's very concrete or freeways or whatever. I mean, I guess you could walk down the halls back and forth, but that's really a dark, boring kind of walk.
But everything you described, Chris, is detrimental to health, not just brain health, but heart health, diabetes, not being, there is benefit to being outside, to
Oh, for
being in
sure.
environments with green grass and green trees. And unfortunately, people, our more vulnerable populations, and I'm thinking, specifically of some that I work with in San Francisco who just don't have access. It's not that they just don't have access to healthy food or places to exercise. They don't have the same access to health care. They don't have the same access to mental health care. And so I'm doing a lot of work with nonprofits. One of them, I'll mention briefly, Open Source Wellness. And what we are doing is providing community as medicine in the form of behavioral health coaching. And we're partnering with health clinics that serve underserved populations where people get a prescription. They get a prescription for community services that bring together people intergenerationally, younger and older adults, and they get coaching on movement, nutrition, how to handle stress. And it's offloading responsibility and time from physicians, but it's also providing a much needed service.
Well, that's cool. That's great. It does seem kind of funny when you think of all the things that we learn when we're in, K through 12 or even in college, just in general, you don't think of some of the basic things, how important it is to be involved in a community and be social with people. I think we all kind of learned a little bit about that with COVID, how everything just seemed to change when we had to stay isolated.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, that was a big mental health problem for many people.
Yes, for many people, and especially older adults.
Oh, yeah, it was, not a great time for older adults, that's for sure.
No, and what's interesting, Jill, since you mentioned it, is that unfortunately, many older adults, they were the ones who were the most isolated because they were the most vulnerable. And let's say they stay isolated for 2 or 3 years during the pandemic. It's hard to change that behavior. I work with some older adults who are mostly homebound still, even though things have changed in the outside world, because that's become the norm and the pattern.
Yeah, your habits really get ingrained. 2 or 3 years of doing something will do that for sure. Can you tell us a little bit more about Healthspan and why it's so important to focus on that more than, say, a lifespan or the chronological age or something like that?
So we used to talk about longevity as gerontologists and medical profession. Longevity is how long you live. When I think of Healthspan, I think it's how long you live well. So when we think about being active, doing the things we love to do, sure, aging may slow us down a little bit. It may change some things, but we still want to be able to do the things we love. So maybe we don't run, but we walk or we hike, or maybe we don't hike 10 miles, but we hike 2 miles. So it's from a physical and mental perspective, it's being able to continue to do the things you love. The more clinical definition is being free of chronic disease and disability. And so what I look at, and I know we're doing this as a podcast and I'm using my hands, but it's like, how can we increase health span, the number of years that we can do the things we love, and reduce disease span? Because at some point, disease will set in. But it's very different. My dad passed away when he was 91. He lived a great life until about maybe the last 6 or 8 weeks of his life. I adored my dad. But he was healthy. He was cognitively fit. He loved life. He loved people. He loved his cat. And he didn't go on for 10 or 20 years in constant pain. That's what I care about. How long can you live well?
Yeah, that is a challenge because, we have many people right now who, because of medical care, live a long time, but don't necessarily live well. So,
and that's increasing. I mean, chronic disease is the number one cause of death in the world, even after COVID. And 80% of chronic disease is associated with poor nutrition, lack of movement, poor sleep, lack of social engagement, too much stress, and substance abuse. So 80% is due to those lifestyle factors. And then, as we said, part of it is social determinants of health, because some people just, they're not in an environment where they can choose healthier lifestyles.
Right. So we talked a bit about food and our brain and our health, but you mentioned alcohol. So let's go back to that for a minute. For a while there, people were saying it was actually kind of healthy to have a glass of wine or whatever. I don't want to say all the time, but occasionally. And now I've heard that that is not really true. So can you talk to us a bit about alcohol?
Yes, I can. The science has changed around alcohol. And the main finding, and I would say this is in the last 2 years, is that if you drink any amount of alcohol, you're putting your health at risk. So now let's talk about any amount. So the CDC used to say moderate drinking is okay. Moderate drinking for women being 1 glass of wine, for men, 2 glasses of wine, or, 1 glass of hard liquor versus 2. So twice as much for men.
Per day?
Per day. So that was as a woman, I could have a glass of wine every day, and that was considered moderate. But the findings are showing that even moderate drinking puts our health at risk, starting with brain health. So some of the studies that I've looked at look at brain volume. So brain volume is going to decrease a little bit as we age anyway. But you know what? Moderate drinking accelerates it. And studies have been done in older adults, and it's been done in middle-aged people. It shows the same thing. The World Health Organization came out with kind of an edict around drinking alcohol in 2023, and that was because alcohol is closely linked to a number of types of cancer. Now, we don't have the randomized clinical trials to say, oh my gosh, yes, Sally drank 3 glasses of wine this week and it caused ovarian cancer. We don't have that, but we're starting to see in observational studies high correlation. And then, so it's brain health, it's heart health. And some of those studies that were done, like, I don't know, in the 90s about a glass of red wine every day, I would tell you that some of the methods were questionable. So some of those results were questionable as well. So the general thinking now is if you don't drink, don't start. If you drink alcohol and you enjoy it in smaller quantities. I hate to be the bearer of bad news for people, but that's true.
No, that's fine. That's good. I actually think that people,
You know it, but you still,
that feels right to me.
Well, and alcohol tends to really mess with your sleep patterns, your deep sleep, or it does mine, I should say. It's hard to stay asleep. If, I can go to sleep real easy if I had a glass of wine, and wind down kind of thing. And then sleep, I'm finding, is such a critical thing for how I'm going to be able to exercise the next day. I just lose all my energy. If I don't sleep well, I'm like, maybe tomorrow,
But Chris, there's a reason for it. Alcohol is a stimulant and a depressant. And so initially it makes you sleepy, but like 2 or 3 hours later, about 1 a.m, you're wide awake. I give a presentation on kind of 9 tips for better sleep as older adults. And tip number 6 is rethink that drink, because it does. It absolutely interferes with your sleep. There's a physiological basis for that.
I just read an article and it said, well, if you have your dreams, your REM sleep later at night, you're more at risk for dementia. And I'm reading that thinking, well, there's nothing I can do that I know of about when I dream at night. What?
And so that's interesting. And something like that, it's kind of clickbait. It grabs our attention. What I would want to do as a researcher is I'd like to see, well, what was the study and how many people and how was the study designed? And I think that's just kind of good general advice. I've read eat blueberries and you won't get dementia. Well, there's some truth in it. Blueberries are full of polyphenols. They're really good for brain health, but there's no one magic superfood. And yet, sometimes something catches our attention and we believe it.
Well, right. And there is the whole clickbait thing, yes. But there are some things you can do things about and some
Right.
things
So I'm
you
like,
can't.
how can I control when I dream? No, I honestly, and I hadn't. I look at a lot of sleep articles. I have not seen that one.
I have a question that we don't have on the prepared list, but the fact that you are a researcher, I just started thinking, so many research articles are either done with younger people, not typically people over 50, or they're done with men and not women. Are you finding that it's getting more balanced, that, more and more we can find that it's information specifically for women over 50?
Yeah, I think that we're trying to change it. I just recently did a qualitative research study on what is healthy aging and what do patients want. And I was oversubscribed with women. Like I had so many women that I had to actually actively recruit for men. But that hasn't always been the case. And I would say now that universities, research institutions are working harder to recruit not only women, but people of color, people with diverse backgrounds. So it's interesting because we were talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, for example, is that though that disease affects people, Black people about twice as much, Hispanic people 1.5 times as much, and yet we don't really have clinical trials that represent that population. The kind of people that typically would sign up with, let's say, a Stanford or UCSF or brain health study are, they're people with means. They're
People with free
educated
time.
people who have the free time. So it is harder to recruit the underserved and underrepresented populations for these studies.
Wow, that's a good point.
Well, I'm looking at my next question, and actually, we talked a little bit about it, the mind diet and how it's different from the Mediterranean diet. I recall you said something about berries, specifically strawberries, or can you go deeper on that?
Yeah, let me be more. I'll be a little bit more specific. Okay, so Mediterranean diet's been around since the 60s. The Mind Diet was developed in 2015 by Rush Medical Center, and it was developed specifically to do research on the relationship between nutrition and brain health. What's interesting with the Mind Diet, it's like these 10 foods to eat and 5 foods to avoid. And so it looks at both the good and the bad. And so the basic things that are in the Mind Diet are the same things that are in the Mediterranean diet. Unsaturated fats, seafood, 1 or 2 servings of fatty fish a week, for example, vegetables, fruits. But what they emphasize in the Mind Diet are berries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, can be any kind of berry, and leafy greens. And these foods are rich in something called polyphenols. And nobody has to really remember that. But these compounds, these polyphenols, appear to be especially good for cognitive health. They're also good for heart health. You can't have a diet that's good for the brain and that isn't good for the heart. They go hand in hand. And the things to avoid, no big surprise, it's sugar, it's fried foods, it's saturated fat, it's red and processed meat. So again, and the way you would score someone on the Mind Diet, you give them points for what they eat, and you take off points for what they eat that was bad.
Interesting. Whether you're following the Mediterranean diet or the Mind Diet or some other kind of diet, are there certain foods like berries or I don't know, almonds? People are big on eating almonds that you should eat every day.
Well, if you really get into the Mind Diet, what the research behind that is, yes, a serving of leafy greens every day, some berries every day. Not everyone can afford berries, so eat some fruit. But leafy greens are so important. I try to get them in every day. But what I will say is that when nutritionists now, we really look at overall dietary patterns. We used to think, oh my gosh, if you just drink green tea or ginkgo biloba or some of those really popular things, kind of in the 80s or 90s. And it's the overall dietary pattern and what you do every day on a regular basis. And if I could give people just two pieces of advice, it's eat real food, eat whole food, eat the stuff that doesn't come in a box and is frozen, eat real food and eat variety because our bodies really want the nutrients from a variety of foods. And even if you eat something really healthy, like blueberries and salad, if that's all you eat, you're not going to get the nutrients you need.
Okay. Thank you. So lifestyle changes that we've talked a bit about sleep and food, alcohol, but is there other lifestyle changes we can make to help our
Movement.
age? Movement.
And I say that opposed to exercise because I don't know, exercise, is like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the gym. I have to do X or what. I can talk about different types of movement being important, but part of it is just moving. It's just moving. So from a cardiovascular perspective, it's, 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week. But if you get 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, that's fine. The other thing, especially as we age, is we need to do strength training. And I love to walk. I would much rather walk or hike than do anything. I don't really like lifting weights or using resistance bands, but I do it 3 times a week because it's so important. Because muscle mass will naturally decline as we age, and we really need to combat it. In part because it will help keep us mobile, it'll keep us upright, it'll improve posture, it'll improve our overall ability to live our best life longer.
Yeah, the muscle mass helps with balance, with so many important things that, you just take it for granted.
Yeah. And you're much more likely to fall. I mean, if you don't have good, let's say quad strength or back strength, and falling is, can be so detrimental to our health as we age because osteoporosis is a disease that affects 1 in 2 women over 50, 1 in 4 men. And a fall can be life-changing and not in a good way.
We mentioned stress a little bit earlier, and we all have times of stress and difficulty in our lives. I mean, that's just normal. How does that have an effect on our brain health and the health span? And, we talk about managing stress to improve health. How do you suggest we do that?
Okay. So let's talk first briefly about how does stress affect us? How does it decrease healthy aging? And then what can we do about it? So there is definitely a physiological connection between stress and health. When we have too much stress, and I'm talking about chronic stress, the day-to-day stressors, not like, oh my gosh, we see a lion. We see a lion in our backyard. Okay.
Oh, for me, it's more like a snake. I might see a snake in the backyard. Not too many lions out there.
Yeah, maybe a snake. Yeah, maybe like a big snake. Yeah. But like our bodies were meant like our stress response is good for acute stress. That's great. But chronic stress leads to high levels of cortisol in our bloodstream. That's the stress hormone. It serves a purpose. But unfortunately, if we're with chronic stress, we have high levels of cortisol in our bloodstream all the time. Guess what? That increases the amount of blood sugar that is circulating. So being under chronic stress is like eating a lot of sugar, and it can lead to insulin resistance, which can lead to diabetes, high correlation between diabetes and Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, and high levels of cortisol will also dysregulate sleep because it interferes with the circadian rhythm that regulates our sleep-wake cycle. So what can you do? I have a couple of tips. I love yoga. I admire Tai Chi. I don't do Tai Chi, but one of these days I will.
In theory, it's great.
Just breath work. Just sitting. I call it a mindful minute. And just, closing your eyes, relaxing your hands, and then just inhale, exhale for a minute. It actually helps regulate the autonomic nervous system, and that can be a big plus. We talked about movement, going out for a short walk. I mentioned earlier I have a dog. Her name's Bella, and I've taught her a command called Joy Break. And we both sit too much. She lays in her poof too much. Mom sits at her computer too much. And I'm like, no, it's like we just need to take a joy break. And we get up and we just go outside and we walk around in our backyard where there aren't snakes or lions. Some of it is like, it's not just taking a class. I mean, I love like meditation. I mean, you could do that. You could do yoga, things like that. But it's taking time out of our day to just kind of stop and be present. Mindful eating is a great one. How many times do we eat on the run? I'm unloading the dishwasher while I'm eating breakfast and trying to, do something else. Like, wow, stop and have a meal.
Those are great tips.
Our audience obviously is almost exclusively women over 50. Some are in perimenopause, some are postmenopause. What role do hormones have in our health span? Like what hormone changes? I guess that might be. Do you have any suggestions for women navigating hormonal changes?
One of the really good things, Jill, is that physicians are starting to pay a lot more attention to this. I'm a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and I chair a committee on women's healthy aging. And we're looking at it from a health span perspective, from a lifespan perspective. So it's not just healthy aging for people over 65, it's across the continuum. And I would say that there's increasing not only research, but like within clinicians' offices, a lot more emphasis on hormones. Hormone replacement was very unpopular for a while, and now it's being looked at again as a safe and effective treatment. And I think what I'm finding, at least in the circles that I travel in, is that physicians are starting to take more seriously things like brain fog and mood changes, where we kind of dismissed them before. And I will share with you a hypothesis. It's a hypothesis. This is not proven, but women are far more likely to develop dementia than men. Two-thirds of the population that have dementia are women compared to 1/3 men. And one of the hypotheses is that it may have to do with hormonal changes going through menopause. Now, we don't know that, but we're at least starting to study it and take it more seriously. So my tip here is that if you are going through, perimenopause, postmenopause, have a conversation with your physician. And, if your physician doesn't want to talk about it or doesn't want to engage, find another physician. Some of the physicians I work with are arranging group medical visits just on this topic, because in 15 minutes with your doctor, you can only do so much. So group medical visits are growing in popularity. So we could all be part of a group and we could work together for 10 weeks and we could learn a lot more and support one another.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard about group medical visits.
Cleveland Clinic, we live in Ohio. The Cleveland Clinic does a lot of those, and they have one on brain health that they do.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Cleveland Clinic is doing a lot in brain health. So that's interesting that's
Yeah, they do. They have it on a number of topics, including like a weight loss kind of thing, but brain health is definitely one. But it's
there's shared medical appointments.
And insurance does, for the most part, cover them just like a doctor visit.
I was thinking too about many of our listeners are in transitions of types, empty nesters, or they've lost a parent or even a spouse. We talked already about changes in menstrual cycle, or maybe retiring from a career, caring for their elderly parents, or, changing purposes in life is maybe, it's something that they didn't select, but all of a sudden you're doing something like that. Do you have any thoughts on developing new life purpose, and how does that affect health span?
So the studies that I have read are overwhelmingly show that having a purpose in life contributes to longevity and health span. And some of the studies that I've looked at, can be very specific in terms of kind of health outcomes. What I find, however, is that if we say to people, well, oh, it's so good to have a purpose in life, then they're like, oh my God, what if I don't have one? Oh my God, like, how do I find it? And honestly, that can cause more stress than anything. So what I have people try to tap into is something like, what do you love to do? And and not compare yourself to a person who goes back to graduate school in their 60s. Not everybody wants to do that. But what do you love to do? And what could make the difference in the life of someone else? Because I believe we're never too old to learn and grow and contribute and make a difference in the world, even if it's for one person. So maybe you love to garden and maybe you expand your garden, but you help some of the neighbor kids learn how to plant seeds. You know, it doesn't have to be, end world hunger, save the whales. It it can be something that gives you joy, that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. And I find, we were talking a little bit about stress. One way to reduce stress, your own stress, is to help someone else.
Yeah. Helping other people does
Yeah.
get you out of your own mind and not
Yeah.
focus so much on your own situation. You're
Yeah.
right.
So that brings up community. And I think you mentioned that earlier, but how important is community? How important is being social? What if you're naturally an introvert and you don't really want to talk to people? Or
Yeah. No, I understand. So, community is extremely important for well-being. We are social beings. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be an extrovert. I'm going to just share a little story though. As 4 years ago during the pandemic, I got a dog, my first dog. Her name's Bella. She's the love of my life. Okay, my husband's cute. He's like, he knows he's a close second. I love Bella, but I love my husband too. But you get where I'm going with that.
yeah,
But I am amazed the people that I know in my community now, in my neighborhood, that I never would have met because I have a dog.
yes.
I
I'm
know everyone. Do you feel the same? Yeah.
Well, I moved into a neighborhood in 2019, and I would say the first year at least, I didn't really meet. I mean, I met like a person or two, but I didn't meet many people. But then in 2020, I got Penny, my dog, and now I know I have like good friends now that because they all have dogs, and but I know so many more people in my neighborhood than I ever did before.
I know. And doesn't it give you a certain sense of joy and happiness? And you walk down the street and people wave. They usually go, hi, Bella. Hi, Bella's mom. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't
They know
Yes.
the dog's name, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's
I ran
fun.
into a neighbor at the gym the other day and she said, "Oh, I was expecting to see Penny trailing along behind you." And I said, "Well, she doesn't come to the gym."
And that doesn't mean that we're extroverts. Like I'm kind of a closet introvert. I'm like a high energy introvert. I love my alone time, my space. I don't like big crowds. I don't need to do all of that. But having a sense of belonging, having a sense of people you can count on is very important. And it's important for, from a health perspective, from, mental stimulation and engagement. It keeps our brains healthy, but also having someone to be able to count on, having somebody to be able to talk to. We talked about stress. Sometimes just sharing with somebody else what you're going through can be hugely important. And so, for people who say, gee, I'm not sure what my purpose is, think of an older adult who might be, lonely. What could you do? Could you call them? Could you spend some time with them? Or volunteer at a dog shelter? I love dogs.
That's right. Well, my next question, I almost hesitated thinking about putting this question on our list, but I am curious about this. From a standpoint of brain health, what about Sudoku puzzles or crossword puzzles or things like that? I've heard people say, "Oh, this helps me," and I do this crossword puzzle every day. Is that something that really works? And if so, what brain exercises do you recommend?
Yeah. And my answer to that, Chris, is it's not exactly. Okay. So let's say Chris, that you do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day. You've been doing it for 10 years. It's not really building new neural networks, okay? Because you do it every day and you've done it for 10 years. If I were to sit down with that same New York Times puzzle, I've never done it. It would be a lot harder for me. So it is going to be better for my brain than your brain just because you've done it so long. However, it's not bad. And what it does is it helps build cognitive reserve. So cognitive reserve is kind of like a big library in our brains that we can draw on. And people who have strong cognitive reserve are often educated. They're well read, they've had certain life experiences. Maybe they do that crossword puzzle every day. And so they may start to have some of the pathology of dementia or cognitive decline, but they're not symptomatic. They don't show it because they have that strong cognitive reserve. So anything that we do for our brain in that way is good. But in terms of building new neural networks, this is neuroplasticity, and we're never too old for this. But the research shows that it's more like novel tasks that take some time to master. So learning the piano would be something that would build new neural networks.
So things that you have, that's why people always say learn a foreign language.
Yeah.
So I'm a great crossword puzzle person. I did it for years. I have a friend recently who she said, I'm trying to do these crossword puzzles every day. And I said, oh, I'm great. I'll whip it out for you, but so I enjoy doing it, but I don't think it's actually building anything in my brain. I understand what you're saying. But
probably not building the new neural network, but you love to do it. I love to do, my husband and I do Wordle and
I do Wordle. So like the
night.
First month I did Wordle, it probably helped my brain, but now it's just like an enjoyable pastime.
Yeah. So that's fine.
But if you really are trying to improve your brain plasticity, you need to find something new.
It's something challenging over a period of time. So there is interesting research out of University of Texas, and the people who had to learn quilting or the people who had to learn digital photography did better when they examined their brains with, fMRI equipment. They could actually see new neural networks, but they were doing that, learning that new over a 14-week period.
14 weeks.
Yeah.
So this is a real thing. It's not just doing a couple little games online or something.
It's not, but the games might lead to something else. I'll tell you, I feel good about graduate school, like going back to work or going back to school in your 60s, taking finals, writing papers. It's good for my brain.
I keep thinking of the stress factor. What about the cortisol there?
Were you significantly older than your fellow students?
Yes, I was. And I was the only kid in my graduating class who was also on Medicare when I got my master's degree. So we did have some mid-career professionals when I got that master's degree. I'll be 74 when I finish my doctorate, but I figure I'll be 74 anyway.
That's right.
Well, if you enjoy it.
So something challenging over a 14-week period, and you can actually see your brain grow.
Yeah. New neural networks.
That's great.
I think it was, speaking of Stanford, I think it was on the Huberman podcast, but they said, I don't know whether he said it or one of his guests, but when you're doing that, learning something new, is that you should first do something physical, go get some movement, and then sit down and learn your new task, and your brain will handle it that much better. Have you heard that?
It could be. I haven't heard it, and I haven't read the study. So when I hear that, then I'm like, oh my God, I want to go to the PubMed database and look at the paper behind it. Huberman he's a pretty good authority. He's a good authority. Yeah.
Yeah. But I always think that's like, so you go out and walk around the block a few times before you sit down and do your learn Spanish or whatever it is you're going to
do 10 jumping jacks and then learn a few things. Then go out.
But, we know that in some ways that makes sense because just movement throughout the day versus just being sedentary is good for us. So, minimally it increases brain flow. I just haven't heard about it in connection with learning something new.
You listen to these podcasts.
That's
and
right.
you
That's
learn
right.
things, but you have to sort of go look it up if you really want to.
Yeah. No,
But it does make
check
sense, and
it
it
out.
certainly wouldn't hurt you to move around before you start your task. All right. Key things for Healthspan that you would suggest our listeners do. What should we focus on the most?
I'm going to give you, well, can I give you 4?
Yes, so you can
Okay.
give us as many as you want.
Okay. But I want to give people some simple ones. Eat real food. Real food like a piece of fish, a piece of chicken, an apple, an orange. Eat whole food. The second is sleep. Go to bed and get up at the same time every day. Some people say they have trouble sleeping at night. Okay. But you can at least get yourself to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. So that is going to help. Move more. Aim to move 30 minutes a day. Doesn't have to be great exercise, it doesn't have to be the gym, but move more. And then I would say incorporate something for stress. So it could be just that mindful minute of breathing.
That's great. Those all seem very achievable, don't they? They're not those big, giant goals that you do New Year's resolution
They
aware.
do. And you might pick one. Like when I said go to bed and get up at the same time every day. I mean, every species sleeps, but only humans will postpone sleep because they're watching something on Netflix or on their phones. Like we avoid bed because we think we're doing something more interesting. Or we go to bed like way too late on weekends and sleep way late. The best thing for sleep, same time every day, Monday through Sunday.
Consistency.
Yeah.
I noticed on your website that you have a program called Wellness Wednesdays. Can you please tell us a little bit about that program?
I'm so glad you asked about Wellness Wednesdays. So Wellness Wednesdays it's a free program. And it's once a month, usually the middle of the month, 11 a.m. Pacific. All the programs are recorded. So even if you can't come, if you register, you get the recording. And these programs feature cutting edge healthcare professionals, researchers, thought leaders, authors on topics related to healthy aging. And I started the program in the pandemic because nothing was going on, right? I wanted to keep older adults healthy and connected. It's on the Zoom platform. Nobody back then was using Zoom. My first program had 6 people, and my second one had 9. And since then, we've had more than 15,000 registered participants from
15,000. Wow.
I don't count them anymore because a lot of organizations have watch parties where they just it would be a senior living facility or our local JCC where they just broadcast them live and I don't know, 20, 25 people attend. But we've had people from all over the world. And, it's part of my mission to make this education available. People can subscribe. So if you want all 100 recordings, you can subscribe. But then the money that I receive from that, I donate to serve to healthy meals to sick and vulnerable seniors in San Francisco.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Because I really want, let's nourish those who need it. Yeah. So thank you for asking about Wellness Wednesday.
That's great.
And anyone can sign up and
Yeah.
watch. Or
Yeah, just come to my website. Can I say that? My website?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, good. Okay. My website is myzinglife.com. And if you go to myzinglife.com, you'll see Wellness Wednesdays. At the top, there's a bar for that. And yeah, just sign up for whatever you're interested in. And if people sign up for my newsletter, then they get updates about all the new programs.
We'll make sure to link to that in our show notes.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Any social media that you...
Yes, I'm at My Zing Life Sally on Instagram and Facebook. And on LinkedIn, I'm Sally Crawford Duplantier.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. Really appreciate your time.
This was so fun. Wellness Wednesdays, I interview so many people. And so it's fun for me to get interviewed.
Well, looking forward to that. And I think I'm going to sign up for those Wellness Wednesdays. So thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Jill and Chris, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
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 One thing that when we were talking with Sally, that came to my mind towards the end was how nice it was that she didn't tell us we had to maintain a healthy weight.
Yeah. Or lose weight, focus on weight so much. Right.
Well, it just seems like so often people focus on our weight, but this was focusing on eating well,
Right.
movement, not, lose weight.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's something definitely to be said about that. Her 4 tips made me feel very comfortable in that I'm trying to do all of those things, and it's really important. Like the sleep, man, I know that sleep influences everything else about my life. If I don't get enough sleep, that's sort of my number one is sleep. I don't know.
It's interesting. Interesting may not be the word, but how much effect having a poor night's sleep has on me now. When I was young, I just would
Oh my gosh, yeah.
go through it, but I really notice it now.
Well, I have noticed each decade it definitely changes. And I used to live in Rhode Island and drive back to Ohio, and we would do overnighters and, leave work on Friday, drive all night, get home to Ohio, and then Sunday leave, like 4:00 or something, and drive all the way back to Rhode Island and go to work the next week. That was when I was in my 20s and 30s. We moved to Ohio when I was 34. So, but thank God, because I could never do that now. It's just sleep is critical for my not just brain function, but body function.
Right. Yeah. Emotions too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think her other choices or her other suggestions were handling stress better. And I know that's a critical one for me. And of course, I think we're hearing more and more about how important social engagement and building a community for someone who actually has studied aging and makes it her life purpose. To have those 4 as the critical things as you age for healthy aging, I think that's really enlightening.
The community, that makes a lot of sense to me, though, because I think about, I live alone. And well, certainly when we were during the pandemic and lockdown, it's hard to be without any human contact outside of, yes, we had Zoom and the telephone,
right.
but that's a hard thing. And even now, I notice I am much happier when I go walk my dog and run into a neighbor and have a conversation.
Right.
As long as we stay off of politics.
That's the truth. But, I think of the wintertime, I tend to be much more a stay-at-home person when the roads are bad and there's ice everywhere. And, I don't even do my outside walks. I have to end up doing a treadmill or something. It's just, I start to get cabin fever. And humans are a social creature.
Yes. Even if you are introverted, you still need human interaction.
Hey, isn't that one of the reasons we decided to make Becoming Ellie a community? That was the first thought. It wasn't the podcast. It wasn't the website. It was a group of like-minded women. And that's, I feel good that we've achieved that in many respects,
And yeah. And you know what? I'm thinking about that. So you can have your friends and your neighbors and people you talk to, but not everyone has the same interests. So that's where I find like the Becoming Ellie community to be helpful, because everyone's maybe in different phases of their journey, but we're all thinking about how to be healthier, fitter, whatever. Which I enjoy. I find that helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Very intentional. Very intentional.
If you're listening, let Chris and me know if you have some thoughts on our talk with Sally and healthy aging and community and sleep. whatever you have a thought about, please share with us.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a message at becomingellie.com. You can also find us on social media as Becoming Ellie on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
And since we were just talking about it, please consider joining our private Becoming Ellie Facebook group.
Are you ready to embrace the next chapter? Aging with Purpose and Passion is a weekly podcast that empowers women over 50 to take on life's biggest challenges with boldness and resilience through courageous, transformative stories.
Hosted by psychotherapist and coach Beverly Glazer, this show dives into topics like loss, abuse, relationships, career transitions, health, and more, offering real insights and practical tools to help you redefine aging, reignite your passion, and embrace your true value with pride. No topic is off limits. Tune in to start creating the joyful life you deserve to achieve.
You can listen at www.agingwithpurposeandpassion.com or on your favorite podcast platform. It was good talking with you today, Jill. I'm looking forward to our next episode of Fit Strong Women Over 50.
I am too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.